My son, due to his mischief, hit his head badly. When we went to the hospital for treatment, the doctor casually said a sentence that made me feel like I had fallen into an ice cave. Zichen, the injured boy has B-type blood. Go to the blood bank and get a matching plasma bag. But both my wife and I have a type blood. How could her son have B-type blood? When my wife found out, she looked completely indifferent. Does it matter whose child he is? As long as he is your son now, isn't it enough? I nodded silently, turned around and stopped my wife's living expenses. Immediate family members cannot donate blood. The doctor slapped my outstretched hand. Parent, I understand how you feel, but you can't act out of desperation. I quickly withdrew my hand, apologetically smiling at the doctor. The doctor looked at the form for a long time, frowning. Besides, you are a type blood. Your son is B-type blood. What have you been doing all this time as his father? What blood type is he? I couldn't believe it and asked the doctor. My wife and I both have a type blood. How could her son possibly have B-type blood? B-type blood. The doctor handed me my son's medical report, puzzled, and asked, what's there to doubt about this? Zichen, go to the blood bank and get a bag of B-type plasma. The doctor said to the nurse at 0 to 0. The doctor took away the form, frowning. Parents like you who usually don't care about their child, only to panic when they fall ill. I've seen too many. Step aside quickly. Don't interfere with our work. With that, he shut the door of the operating room. I sat outside alone, feeling a chill all over my body. I couldn't believe that the son I had raised for 8 years wasn't biologically mine. Even harder to believe was that the woman I had loved for so long had betrayed me long ago. I picked up my phone, my hands shaking as I dialed my wife's number. I wanted an explanation from her. The call took a long time to go through. Finally, she answered right before it automatically disconnected. Hello, John Congnan. What exactly do you want? I already told you I have something to do today. Why do you keep calling me? My wife's impatient voice hit me as soon as she picked up. I bit my lip, steadying my trembling hands as I asked, is our son really mine? There was a brief silence on her end. Then she suddenly became furious. John Congnan, what do you mean by that? I've been married to you for so many years. Have I ever wronged you? Don't you know that in your heart? And now you have the nerve to question me about whether our son is really yours? I took a deep breath, suppressing my anger. Come to the hospital now. Our son hit his head. He'll need you after the surgery. I already told you I don't have time. She sounded even more irritated. John Congnan, can't you just listen to me? As you wish. A familiar voice suddenly came from her side. My entire body froze, as goosebumps rose all over me. Almost done. Don't worry, okay? My wife gently consoled someone, blocking the phone. I couldn't hold back anymore, and I shouted in anger, Liu Ryan, I told you to come to the hospital right now. Her attitude grew worse. I already said I don't have time. He just has a small cut. Why are you making such a big deal out of it? I'm dyeing my hair right now. The color just got applied. I can't leave at all. Why can't you understand me for once? Understand you? I felt like I was breaking down. Fine, let's lay it all out. I'll try to understand you. Just tell me why our son has B-type blood. There was a pause on the other end, as if she was thinking about something. I felt like a drowning man, clinging to her response as if it were my only lifeline. But in the next second, she shattered my hopes. What's wrong with B-type blood? She paused again, as if someone on the other side had spoken to her. After a while, she said, he's my son with Ian. So what? Her voice remained indifferent, even justified, like nothing was wrong. I felt like I had plunged into a frozen abyss, unable to recover for a long time. Why aren't you saying anything? She continued. Forget about who his real father is. As long as you treat him well, isn't that enough? Liu Ryan, don't you have any shame left? We had just gotten married and you couldn't wait to go back to Yang Yan. Do you really love him that much? I growled through gritted teeth. No wonder. No wonder my son never felt particularly close to me. Does it really matter whose child he is? My wife was getting angry too. He calls you dad now. Isn't that enough? Why do you have to talk to me like that? Can't you be a little more generous? Before I could say anything more, the call was abruptly cut off by a busy signal. I bit my lip trying to stand up, but I couldn't summon any strength. Clatter asterisk. My phone slipped from my hand and hit the floor. I stared helplessly at the ceiling, tears unknowingly welling up in my eyes. Back in school, the three of us were college classmates. I had fallen for Liu Ryan. The moment I first laid eyes on her, you could even call it love at first sight. But Liu Ryan's gaze had always followed Yang Yan. I had no choice but to bury those feelings deep inside, keeping them as my eternal secret. When Yang Yan got married, Liu Ryan sat alone at the reception, drinking a whole bottle by herself. She was so drunk she lost consciousness. Afraid something might happen to her, I took her back to my place. Later, maybe she wanted Yang Yan to regret his choice, or maybe she finally noticed my years of devotion. She agreed to be with me. For a long time, though, she would constantly compare me with Yang Yan, either intentionally or not. And the conclusion was always the same. I couldn't match up to Yang Yan in anything, but I never got angry. Because I always believed, as long as I treated her a little better, she would surely fall in love with the one who stood by her side day and night. Until I became successful in my career, Liu Ryan agreed to my proposal. Those were the happiest days of my life. Later, Yang Yan got divorced. He casually sent a message to Liu Ryan. Ryan, I'm divorced. I miss you so much. Liu Ryan left everything behind and went to find him. It was only then that I realized the white moonlight had always been the bright moonlight. In Liu Ryan's heart, I could never compare to Yang Yan. My love for her, day after day, slowly faded as she resolutely ran towards Yang Yan, until nothing was left. Even now, the only reason she and I are together is because of our son's birth, which barely formed the semblance of a family. I thought back to that period when Liu Ryan was pregnant with our son, how her attitude towards me had drastically changed. It was then that I realized she was using it to cover up the fact that the child was not my own. After our son was born, she often stared at his face, smiling foolishly. I once thought she genuinely loved the child, but now I think she truly loved Yang Yan. I looked at the wedding photo on my phone and felt my stomach churn. The nausea made me want to vomit. I don't think this marriage needs to continue. After leaving Liu Ryan's phone number at the hospital, I walked away. I don't know how to face this son whom I've loved for 8 years. I simply turned off my phone and threw myself into work. When I got off work and returned home, what greeted me wasn't an apology from Liu Ryan, but the sound of her angry yelling. Where the hell have you been? I called you so many times. Why didn't you answer? I didn't even have a chance to speak before she cut me off. Only your job is important. Only your job can't wait. So what? Since the child isn't yours, do you have to throw everything on me? I looked at her coldly. The child indeed isn't mine. No matter how low I stoop, I won't raise a son for you and someone else. And when I heard he was hurt, I rushed over without stopping to get him examined. What about you, his mother? Were you on a date with his real father? Liu Ryan's face changed, but she still wouldn't relent with her words. So what if he's not your flesh and blood? After so many years, Haven't you treated him like your own son? They say the grace of raising is greater than that of giving birth. Besides, he only calls you dad now. Can't you be a little more generous? Do you have to make a mess out of our family? Will that make you happy? If you were just a bit more magnanimous and pretended you didn't know, wouldn't everything be fine? Why do you have to hold on to it? Liu Ryan kept rambling on. After speaking her piece, she raised her head and glanced at me, as if expecting the answer she wanted from me. Her words made me laugh out of anger. I didn't want to deal with her anymore. I turned around and walked away from her and locked the door behind me to show my stance. She went wild, pounding furiously on my bedroom door. John Congnan opened the door for me. Am I not speaking the truth? If you could just be a bit more generous, our son would still take care of you in the future, wouldn't he? What exactly are you so angry about? Seeing that I refused to speak, she finally left. Before leaving, she let out a cold laugh, saying, John Congnan, if you have the guts, don't speak to me for the rest of your life. Yes. In the past, no matter who was at fault, as long as she got angry, I would always be the one to apologize first. I had always thought it was just her stubborn pride. But when I accidentally saw her apologizing humbly to Yang Yan, I finally understood. She simply didn't want to lower herself to me. From that day on, we entered a cold war. I focused only on my work. I couldn't be bothered with anything related to her and our son. She sneered at my indifferent expression. I wonder how long you'll keep this up. John Congnan, if you apologize to me now, I might still consider forgiving you. I looked at her speechlessly, not wanting to say another word, for fear it would lower my own intelligence. I found some time to bring a paternity test with the child to the law firm and handed over all the evidence of Liu Ryan's infidelity over the years to the lawyer. While drafting the divorce agreement, I discovered that over the years, a significant portion of my assets had been sold off by Liu Ryan. I couldn't bear it anymore. I called the bank and froze Liu Ryan's bank account. When I got home that evening, I was met with Liu Ryan's furious yelling. John Congnan, what right do you have to freeze my bank card? She stood in front of me, shouting, do you know how embarrassing it was for me today when I was out with my girlfriends? Hurry up and transfer 100,000 to my account, or this isn't over. I looked at her hysterical face and felt disgusted. I didn't want to say anything more. I walked into the living room, took the divorce agreement out of my briefcase, and calmly said to her, Liu Ryan, let's get a divorce. Her face turned pale instantly. Are you serious? I sneered. What else would it be? Let's end things on good terms. After saying that, I turned to leave. But behind me came Liu Ryan's desperate question. What if I agree to have another child with you, one that's truly yours? I responded with a cold expression. There's no need. Just sign the papers. You want a divorce? She looked at me in disbelief. Are you really going to divorce me over such a small matter? Then what about all my sacrifices for this family over the years? Not only do you forget all the good I've done, now you're divorcing me over this little thing. John Congnan, are you insane? What exactly have you done for this family? I looked at her with a mocking smile. Was it shopping and playing cards every day with your friends? Or seizing every chance to sneak off with Yang Yan for your secret rendezvous? Before she could speak, I pulled out evidence of her infidelity from my briefcase. Do you have anything to explain? She quickly glanced at the papers in front of me. She continued speaking. All these years, I resigned to stay home and take care of our son. I paused. If I hadn't resigned, how could I have been questioned by you just for a few peanuts? John Congnan, sometimes you need to reflect on yourself more. That's your son. If you don't take care of him, who will? I watched her slowly start speaking again. You clearly know why your son got hurt this time. Was it me who forced you not to go to work? I chuckled. Weren't you the one who insisted on setting up that image of the perfect wife? She opened her mouth, but said nothing more. I looked at her and sighed, let's divorce. Stop torturing each other. Fine, we can divorce. Liu Ryan glanced at me a few times, but the property must be split equally. I was once again shocked by her shamelessness, not knowing what to say. I pointed to the evidence on the table and said, just with these alone, I can make sure you leave with nothing. I watched her face turn red with anger and continued. Plus, I discovered you've sold off a lot of the cars and houses under my name. Where's the money? Her face changed when she heard this, but she still stubbornly replied, I spent it. If you hadn't given so little in the first place, would I have gone to the trouble of selling those if you weren't so stingy? I said nothing. I just kept staring at her intensely. I watched her expression grow worse. And then I said at the right moment, do you really think I don't know where you spent the money? Was giving the money to Yayan your big plan? Liu Ryan's face twisted with anger and shame. Yayan just needed an opportunity. Leaving those cars and houses idle is a waste, isn't it? Turning them into cash for Yayan would even bring you a return. Yayan promised, once he makes money, he'll pay you back with interest. So what's your problem? I looked at her and said, during college, Yang Yayan borrowed $200,000 from me to start a business. Has he paid it back? Liu Ryan's face shifted colors repeatedly, but in the end, she said nothing. You spent our shared marital assets on him. You'd better get all that money back, or I don't want to see you in court. I lost any desire to keep arguing and said firmly, this marriage is ending no matter what. Fine, end it. Don't think I've ever liked you that much. Liu Ryan, furious and flustered, spat out. Tomorrow morning, let's go to the civil affairs office. With that, she swiftly signed the divorce agreement on the table and slammed the door as she left. I looked at the signed divorce agreement on the table, feeling momentarily dazed. 1 year of dating, 9 years of marriage. This chaotic decade of mine finally came to an end. At this moment, just like that, the 1-month divorce cooling off period ended quickly. On the day we collected our divorce certificate, both Liu Ryan and I eagerly arrived at the office. But to my surprise, she brought our son along with Yang Yayan. Kids are usually simple-minded. They believe whatever their parents tell them. The 8-year-old looked me up and down and laughed loudly. Good thing I got a new dad. Otherwise, having you as my dad would have been so embarrassing. Sigh, Ziyang, don't talk to your uncle like that. Liu Ryan smiled with a hint of schadenfreude. If you speak like that, your uncle might get angry. Indeed. I slowly glanced at them. A happy little family fit for the dead. What do you mean by that? Liu Ryan suddenly became flustered. My son said you were embarrassing and now you're the one feeling wronged? All these years, I never heard you land any significant project. Unlike our capable Yayan. Exactly. The boy sneered at me. My dad is the CEO of a listed company. Can you compare to that? I looked at the arrogant child in front of me. For the first time, I felt the undeniable power of genetics. Liu Ryan finished speaking with a triumphant smile. Good thing I remained steadfast with Yayan all these years. Otherwise, who knows how much more I would have suffered with you. She carefully observed my reaction, and seeing that, my expression remained calm. She grew anxious and spoke up. You probably don't know, do you? All these years, I never loved you. Zhang Kongnan, your wife doesn't love you. Your son isn't yours. And your company has amounted to nothing. If I were you, I wouldn't have the face to keep living in this world. Exactly. The boy chimed in, I spent so many years at Uncle's house. Uncle wouldn't even let me have extra candy, unlike my dad. With that, he opened his mouth and laughed at me. I noticed the small black spots beginning to appear on his teeth, and nodded indifferently, acknowledging that everything he said was true. I asked, Now that you've said your piece, can we proceed with the divorce? Liu Ryan glared at me, but in the end said nothing more. She clicked her high heels against the floor and walked inside. After receiving the divorce certificate, I let out a sigh, reflecting on the past 10 years of my life. But in Liu Ryan's ears, it turned into something else. She smiled smugly and said, "What's this? Begging me now, are you? If you beg me, I might convince Yan to spare your company. Otherwise, just wait for bankruptcy." I looked at her helplessly, wondering where all her desire to make me submit had come from. I didn't want to get tangled up with her any longer. I waved my hand dismissively. "Whatever you say." With that, I ignored the fury, turning her face red, and turned to leave. But just a few days later, my in-laws showed up at my doorstep. I sighed as I looked at them standing there. They still asked them to come in. Asterisk slap asterisk. Before I could react, my father-in-law's palm had already struck my face. I was hit so hard that I was a bit dazed, raising my head in confusion to look at the two elderly people. "Mom, it was him who forced me to divorce." My wife threw herself into my mother-in-law's arms, sobbing. "All right, your dad is here to stand up for you, isn't he?" My mother-in-law gently comforted her. My father-in-law looked at me, snorting coldly. "If it weren't for us accidentally finding out about your divorce with Ryan and calling her, we wouldn't have known how much she had endured here with you. She didn't even dare to tell us about the divorce." I suddenly understood. It wasn't that she didn't dare to say. It was that she was too embarrassed to say it. I explained Liu Ryan cheated. I divorced her. Is there any problem with that? What kind of injustice did she suffer? Uncle, you're a man too. Can you tolerate your wife cheating on you? I handed the paternity test report from my briefcase to him. "Take a look at this," I said. "Even the child isn't biologically mine. Is it wrong for me to divorce her?" The faces of the two elderly people instantly changed. "You're talking nonsense." Liu Ryan raised her head from my mother-in-law's arms and said, "Mom, are you just going to let him slander me like this? For so many years, even if I haven't had major achievements in this family, I've at least made some sacrifices. But now he insists on divorcing me, even going as far as forging a paternity test report. He doesn't even want the child anymore. Who knows if he has someone else outside." After saying that, she looked at me. "If you don't like me, just say it directly. Why go to such lengths to fabricate things and ruin my reputation?" "Enough!" My father-in-law interrupted her, clearly believing me. "Kongnan is a good child. We've watched him grow up all these years." My father-in-law looked at Liu Ryan. "You should apologize properly to Kongnan. This marriage can't end in divorce." At that moment, Liu Ryan's phone suddenly rang. She was so upset by my father-in-law's words that she didn't even glance at the screen and answered the call. Before she could react, the voice on the other end spoke. "Ryan, when will you bring the child over? I haven't properly seen him all these years. After all, he's my biological son." "Shut up!" "No, it's not like that." Liu Ryan hurriedly hung up the phone, frantically trying to explain to her parents, mom, dad. "He's lying." "Enough!" My father-in-law shouted angrily. "What are you trying to show me?" "To show just how shameless you are. Within less than a year of marriage, you had someone else's child. And you were the one who said in front of us that the divorce was because Kongmin made you suffer? What exactly did you suffer?" Liu Ryan's face turned pale. She opened her mouth but couldn't utter a single word. "That's right, Ryan. How could you treat Kongnan like this?" My mother-in-law chimed in. "All these years, how has Kongnan treated you? We've all seen it with our own eyes. If you don't love him, don't waste his time. What do you think you're doing now?" Liu Ryan bit her lip, refusing to say a word. At that moment, Her phone rang again at the worst possible time. Is that the person who meddled in someone else's family? My father-in-law asked, fuming with anger. Before Liu Ryan could react, he tried to grab her phone to check it himself. Dad, what are you doing? Liu Ryan tightly protected her phone in her arms. I'll handle my own affairs. You don't need to worry. Just apologize to Kongnan immediately. This marriage can't end like this. She glanced at a message, and suddenly she smiled and said, Yain just secured another big deal with a major company. He's nothing like John Kongnan, who's been stuck in mediocrity for years. Hearing this, I finally understood. The reason she was so confident during the divorce was because of a few deals that Yang Yan had secured. Liu Ryan, my father-in-law yelled in anger. No matter what you say today, you must cut ties with that man. Otherwise, don't consider me your father. Exactly. Ryan, in our time, such behavior would have led to being punished by being thrown into a pig cage. My mother-in-law tried to reason with her. I know you young people now advocate for freedom and love, but you can't take freedom this far. If you don't admit your wrongdoing, then your father and I will consider you no longer our daughter. Kongnan is a good kid. You two should make it work. Liu Ryan was getting irritated as well. Am I your biological child, or is he? Is it wrong for me to pursue my true love? Mom, Dad, if you had met Yayan first, you would never have considered John Kongnan. She glanced at my furious father-in-law, my mother-in-law, and at my indifferent, silent self. Sneering, that's the only thing you have over Yayan. She suddenly chuckled coldly, John Kongnan. Yayan said, when his company grows a bit larger, he's going to buy out your company and give it to me as a toy. Mom, Dad, just give up. I'm never getting back together with John Kongnan. She looked at me with a triumphant smile, then turned to my in-laws and said, I'll bring Yayan over to meet you someday. You'll definitely like him. After saying this, she walked away with a smug smile, heels clicking. Come back and talk properly, my father-in-law shouted after her. But she acted as if she didn't hear. I watched as my father-in-law clutched his chest, struggling to breathe. In the end, I couldn't bear it. I helped him sit down on a chair in the living room. Kongnan, is there really no chance for you to anymore? My mother-in-law, tears streaming down her face, grabbed my hand and asked, I've always known that you're a good child. In this matter, it's Ryan who wronged you. You've seen it yourselves. Even if I agreed, Liu Ryan would never agree. I said to them with a heavy heart. I didn't say much more. After their emotions calmed down, I sent them back home. After the divorce, Liu Ryan would occasionally send me a few photos, her and Yang Yayan looking intimate together, to show off how happy she was after leaving me. She would also throw in a few harsh words, telling me that Yang Yayan was in the process of acquiring my company, and that soon I'd be bankrupt. Whenever she said those things, I couldn't help but laugh. All these years, Liu Ryan had been entirely focused on Yang Yayan. Naturally, she had no idea how large my company had grown by now. She was just eagerly waiting for Yang Yayan to fulfill her unrealistic fantasy, to slap me in the face. But what I didn't expect was that I would have such close dealings with Yang Yayan's company. Kongnan, you must stay far away from that company. A drunken friend, holding a stack of documents, said to me, this show company of his, its sales figures, are all inflated by fake transactions. With tactics like these, he scammed several companies out of their deposits. They saw the company's low prices and placed large orders. But who would have thought? My friend said with a smirk, they're not fools. They're just in it to scam the deposits. I took the documents from his hand and flipped through them. On the page with the photos, I saw a picture of Yang Yayan. I had already suspected Yang Yayan's true intentions. His company was never a legitimate publicly listed company, but I never expected him to be involved in this kind of shady business. I looked at the list of bosses he had already offended and had a gut feeling that his future wouldn't be easy. The next time I saw them both was at a cocktail party. It was an event specifically held to celebrate my company's successful development of a new product that had taken the market by storm. At that time, Yang Yan was struggling. He had offended to many companies, and his finances were in a tight spot. He was at the party, desperately seeking new partners. I watched them speaking humbly to a certain boss, curious, and approached them. Mr. Liu, our company is definitely worth collaborating with, but I don't know why there are so many rumors slandering our company outside. Yang Yan flattered. But that doesn't diminish the excellence of our company. Choosing us is definitely the right decision, Mr. Liu. The man addressed as Mr. Liu sneered and said, "Do you really think there's anyone left in the circle who doesn't know what you've done? Scamming deposits. I can't believe you had the nerve." Hey, Mr. Liu, this must be a misunderstanding. As he spoke, he pushed Liu Ryan forward. How about you let Ryan chat with you for a while? I have a little something to attend to over there. What do you mean by this? Yang Yan? Liu Ryan frowned, glaring at him. When you married me, wasn't it because didn't you say before that you'd always prioritize me for the best things? And now what? You're making me hang around this old man. Are you asking me to keep him company or to sell myself? The once cheerful man's expression instantly darkened upon hearing Liu Ryan's words. He sternly replied, "I never knew that Miss Liu thought of me that way. In that case, I'd rather not stoop to working with your company, Mr. Yang." Mr. Liu. Wait, Mr. Liu. Yang Yan nudged Liu Ryan. Go quickly. Apologize to Mr. Liu. Liu Ryan ignored him, standing stubbornly with tears welling up in her eyes. Without another word, he turned and left. But before leaving, he glanced at me, who was observing the scene with amusement, and said with a smile, "President Zhang, you really are young and promising." I nodded with a smile and was about to leave, but Liu Ryan called out to me from the side. "Zhang Kongnan, are you feeling pleased with yourself now?" "What do you mean by that? I'm young, successful, and accomplished. Who else should be feeling pleased if not me?" She looked at me with reddened eyes. "Do you think that you've crushed me under your foot now? That without you, I'd be lost? Let me tell you, you're dreaming." Then her tone shifted. "Unless." I raised an eyebrow. "Unless what?" "Unless you merge your company with Yan's. Otherwise, I will never forgive you." She said this with her head held high, as if certain that I would agree. I took a deep breath, suppressing the urge to burst out in laughter. The people nearby were all looking at her as if she were insane. They glanced at her with puzzled eyes, yet she remained completely oblivious to it all. "You came in just to suck up to Mr. Zhang from Fasheng Group, didn't you?" She sneered, feeling incredibly smug. "Yi En is quite familiar with Mr. Zhang. If you agree to merge the companies, I'll have a word with Yi En, and maybe get him to introduce you to Mr. Zhang." After finishing her sentence, she cast a disdainful glance in my direction. "Both of you share the same surname Zhang, but why are you so disappointing?" I turned to Yang Yan. "Are you really that close to Mr. Zhang?" He wiped the sweat from his brow, stammering, "Of course I know him. I advise you to hurry up and agree to the merger like Ryan said, or things might not go so well." Before I could respond, the event schedule moved on, and it was time for my speech of thanks. I glanced at the one filled with arrogance, the other trying hard to appear calm, and I chuckled. Turning to Yang Yan, I said, "How come I don't remember you being that close with Mr. Zhang?" The moment Liu Ryan heard that, she snapped. "Zhang Kongnan, what do you mean by that? Are you implying that Yi En has been lying to me? Don't be ridiculous. Yi En isn't a spineless loser like you." Her words grew harsher by the second. Someone nearby, unable to take it anymore, stood up for me, but I quickly interrupted. When the announcement called me to the stage, every gaze in the hall fixated on me. On the other side, Liu Ryan still wore that arrogant, smug expression. I've already told you, Yi and Mr. Zhang are really close. Otherwise, why would everyone look at Yi when Mr. Zhang was mentioned? She sneered as if it was obvious. I didn't want to continue speaking with her, but from the corner of my eye, I saw Yang Yi, his face as pale as a ghost, staring at me in sheer panic. His mouth opened and closed, yet he couldn't utter a single word. I adjusted my suit and confidently strode toward the stage. Behind me, I could hear Liu Ryan's voice, frantic with anger. Zhang Kongnan, how dare you? Wait until Mr. Zhang arrives, and you'll see how he deals with you. Her furious outburst jolted Yang Yi back to his senses. He quickly covered Liu Ryan's mouth, preventing her from saying anything else. Not a word more. I smiled at the audience. Good evening, everyone. I am Zhang Kongnan, the CEO of Fusheng Group. Thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedules to attend this celebration banquet. No, that's impossible, Liu Ryan screamed, interrupting my speech. It can't be you. Zhang Kongnan. This must be an actor you hired to make me regret everything, isn't it? She searched my eyes, desperately hoping to see a flicker of panic. But I merely glanced at her, completely indifferent, without acknowledging her. I simply continued with my speech. No, it's impossible, Liu Ryan muttered, her face deathly pale, as she collapsed to her knees. As I passed by her, she grabbed onto my leg, sobbing uncontrollably. I'm sorry, Kongnan, I know I was wrong. I really know I was wrong. Let's not get divorced, please? Before I could say anything, Yang Yi rushed over, furiously pulling her away. Liu Ryan, don't you dare embarrass me like this in public. Yang Yi then turned to me, forcing a smile and speaking in a low, apologetic tone. I apologize, Mr. Zhang. We didn't mean to offend you. We're truly sorry, and we hope you can forgive us, Mr. Zhang. Kongnan. Liu Ryan whispered my name, but after receiving a sharp glare from Yang Yi, she quickly fell silent. I watched their pathetic act with growing boredom. Suddenly, it all felt pointless. So I turned around and left the banquet. Not long after, I heard Yang Yi's name again. He had become a prisoner. Yang Yi had angered to many companies. His funds ran dry, and his company's reputation was in shambles. He had, in effect, driven himself into a corner. After that banquet, it didn't take long for Yang Yi to announce the company's bankruptcy. But before that, due to the deliberate actions of another company boss, he was caught evading taxes. It was a considerable sum of money, and he didn't have the funds to cover it. So he ended up in prison. I looked at his miserable downfall. I thought I would feel some sense of satisfaction, but there was only a faint sense of relief. If it weren't for him, I never would have seen Liu Ryan for who she truly was, and I wouldn't have divorced her so resolutely. I closed my phone, sighed about the inevitable consequences of karma, and went home. But just as I stepped out of the car, someone grabbed onto my legs. Kongnan, I know I was wrong. Please don't leave me. Before I could respond, Liu Ryan's voice pierced through my eardrums. She knelt in front of me, sobbing uncontrollably. I shouldn't have taken you for granted. It was my fault. I shouldn't have looked down on you for not being capable enough. I stepped back a couple of paces, not wanting to look at her in such a state. You've already had a child with him. What's the point in saying all this now? I meant for her to face reality, but my words seemed to trigger something inside her, as if they had flipped a switch. Suddenly, she sprang to her feet. I caught a whiff of her foul odor, and instinctively took 2 more steps back. She rushed toward me, her eyes wide with desperation. Kongnan, you love children, don't you? I know you do. How about I give you a child? A child that belongs to us alone? I've divorced Yang Yi. I won't go back to him anymore. I'll cut all ties with him forever. She promised, her voice trembling with hope. Just give me one more chance, okay? Please, I'm begging you. Give me one more chance. She broke down again, sobbing as she cursed. Yang En is a monster. He's in prison, safe and sound. But what about me? What about me and my son? Are we doomed to live in constant fear? Do we deserve to be hunted down by debt collectors? She looked at me, her face streaked with tears. Kongmin, don't worry. I can give you a son. I swear it. She cried and pleaded. If you just give me another chance, I'll do anything for you. Listening to her desperate pleas, my mind drifted to the evidence I had collected. Liu Ryan, completely naked, entangled herself with Yang Yan, and just the sight made me feel nauseated. I shot her a cold glare, not bothering to say anything as I turned to leave. Wait! Liu Ryan shouted, dragging a small boy from the pile of garbage behind her. Kongmin, look at him carefully. He's the son you've raised for 8 years. Don't you feel even a little bit of attachment? The boy lifted his head, his timid eyes meeting mine. Under Liu Ryan's coercion, he squeaked out in a thin voice, Dad. I looked at him and said, Lin An, I've never taught you to bully others using power. Yet the first thing you do when you learn it is to use that very tactic against me. What makes you think I'd still want to be your father? I finished, ignoring the wailing and cursing behind me, and walked back into the house, seeing they still had no intention of leaving. I casually called the police. After the officers arrived, peace finally returned to my yard, and they disappeared from my life. Daddy, why was that boy hitting the lady? My daughter asked sweetly, clinging to me. I turned to look where she was pointing, seeing a boy around 10 years old standing in front of a trash can, yelling at the woman kneeling before him. Why are you so useless? If you hadn't cheated, I'd be living a good life with my dad right now. The boy continued to curse angrily, his voice harsh with frustration. How could you ... double quotes ... end up scavenging trash here? The boy added bitterly. The woman knelt on the ground, trembling, not daring to say a word. Perhaps my daughter and I were too noticeable standing there. As the woman lifted her head and looked over at us, the moment she saw me, her eyes lit up, as if she had grasped onto her final lifeline. Slowly, she began crawling toward me. The boy, seeing her movement, froze for a moment, then followed her gaze in my direction. Dad! The boy ran over to me, smiling, but in the process, he viciously stepped on the woman's hand. Dad, did you come here for me? Have you finally had enough of seeing me suffer? Dad, I know I was wrong. I've been punishing my mom these past few years. Can you forgive me? Daddy, my daughter whispered softly, this boy smells bad. The boy's face immediately turned pale. He glanced up at my daughter in my arms, then quickly lowered his head, mumbling an apology. Sorry, I've mistaken you for someone else. You didn't make a mistake. The woman had finally crawled up to me, gazing at me with pleading eyes. It's me. Kongmin, I know I was wrong. Look at me again. Please, I replied. You've mistaken me. The boy dragged the woman away as he spoke, muttering curses under his breath, though I couldn't make out his words. I turned back toward home. Daddy, do you know those two? My daughter asked, looking up at me. Guess, I said, winking at her, offering no further explanation. What difference would it make if I recognized them? What does their life have to do with me anymore? Wash up, dinner's ready. My wife's voice called out to me. She wrapped her arms around me. Had a long day? I smiled at her and hugged both of them tightly. I'm fine as long as I live well.